I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either gonna be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Hello, this is a bonus episode from the Chalke History Festival, where I bumped into a number of historians and writers to talk about their books. Links are in the show notes, and please excuse the noise of the loud fan in the background. It was 35 degrees plus. Drink? Now, shall we begin? Okay, we'll start. This is the History Book Club podcast at Chalke, and this is a huge honour for me because I'm here with four people I'm a huge admirer of. So we have Annie, Chave, the author of Cricket Changed My Life, Vic Marks, who's written a book about England cricket captains, Roland Butcher, of course, the first black player for England, and has written a book called Breaking Barriers, and then Simon Hughes, the statistician, who everyone will know, and also whose sister Bettany is a very distinguished historian. But I'm really pleased to have you here, and I wanted to speak to Annie first because really it was your book that interested me in coming to this day, Jim and I coming to this day, because I followed you in social media for many years, and I know you're a huge fan of championship county cricket. But how did cricket change your life?
Well, it did change my life quite a lot. In fact, that I always loved cricket right from I was tiny, so it's kind of been inbred. So it didn't change in that way. But what happened was I watched cricket, I played cricket, I watched village cricket all my early childhood, and then when my son left for university, I started to write a bit on social media about county championship mostly, and then people got in touch with me, said would you like to write this or that, and then Guerrilla Cricket got in touch with me, asked if I'd like to do some broadcasting, and then somehow, I don't know quite how it happened, I think it is a bit Miles Jupp and Fibber in the Heat, but I ended up in Barbados with both Vic Marks and Roland Butcher just working on the first test match against England. So it was one that West Indies won, so it was very jubilant, and it just kind of kick-started from there. And then I started a magazine because I was a bit concerned about what the 100 would do to county championship cricket, and then I lost my job, which was completely by the by. I worked for a theatre company and they lost their funding, so then I went in, but just as I lost my job, the BBC contacted me and asked if I wanted to do some commentary for the BBC Somerset, for the championship matches, and so it kind of, and then suddenly I'm in a totally different world. It's a cricket world, and it's wonderful, and I've met so many lovely people. So yeah, it changed my life in that way.
That is the dream. I need to do something like that. Vic, your book on England captains is coming at the right moment, as it does with the current England captain going through a little bit of a problem with the ECB. What is it about the ECB and they're incapable of administering the game properly?
Well, I'm not sure the current crisis is entirely their fault, and it's not necessarily the perfect time either, because I wrote it about a year ago, and there is jeopardy about writing about, say, Ben Stokes 12 months ago, and I was very fulsome in my praise of him in the final chapter. I still would be fairly fulsome in praise, but quite a lot of stuff has happened since then, so that's a bit of a problem, really. But I can't remember what the original question was.
It was about the ECB and whether they administer the game properly.
Well, yes, how do we get to that? Well,
It's a big question,
there is a lot of precedence for them, people in charge of English cricket, with sort of thinking about the captaincy, doing it appallingly, not just in 2026, but I always think back to 1988, England had 4 different test captains in 5 matches, and it was total chaos. In this particular instance, this week, last week, well, they can't quite guarantee where their captain Ben Stokes is at 2 o'clock in the morning after a test victory. But actually, I think their response has been appropriate. They dropped him, but they didn't send him to, exile him to wherever. They had to do something. He's had to be dropped for a test match along with Atkinson. I think it was actually appropriate to bring him back. So I don't think you can lay the blame entirely on the ECB, actually, as we speak.
I'm being far too harsh. And exile to Durham's not that bad, is it?
What do you think?
Well, there are worse places, I gather, to be exiled to, whereas Durham's up north somewhere. Yeah. Simon played for him.
I know, yes, he did.
He exiled himself to Durham.
Roland, your book, Breaking Barriers. I know you played, I think, 3 test matches for England. I think I wanted to ask you, if you were playing now, how many test matches do you think you would notch up for England in the modern era?
I would notch up 250 T20s. No, seriously.
You're a rich man.
Yeah. That's why I play 220. No, listen, I'm still very much in love with Test cricket. I mean, it's my favourite format of the game. So, I would love to be playing it now. I think especially now, because when I see some of these bowlers in Test cricket, it's quite a friendly game right now. So.
We can explain that.
Yeah. I mean,
facing Marshall, Holding,
Roberts, Garner, Croft,
who were handy.
And the other teams weren't too bad either. Lily Thompson and those people were on at the same time. So I think playing now would make sense, and you would also be a lot wealthier.
You'd like playing from the cover too.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Encourage you to play.
Yeah, freedom to play. Yeah.
Simon, I wanted to ask you. Jim and I grew up with cricket on TV, terrestrial TV. Love watching cricket on telly. Now it's on Sky, and Sky's done a lot for the game, obviously financially. But I wondered, would you ever want to see a return to terrestrial TV, cricket on terrestrial TV?
Yeah, I mean, I would love that, but I know it's not going to happen, because it's very difficult to schedule Test cricket now on a terrestrial station with all the competition for other programming. And Test cricket, as we've seen in the last 6 months, is very unpredictable. You get a big build-up to an Ashes series, and then the game's over after 2 days. So it's very difficult for broadcasters, and the money they have to spend to buy the rights as well for terrestrial stations like the BBC is beyond their reach. So although it's a dream to see that, and I think it's been one of the things that has held the game back in the last 20 years, is that it's behind the Sky paywall. You're right, Sky have done a great job on it. Their coverage is faultless, but it's only seen by a small proportion of the population, probably 2 million. we got 9 million on Channel 4 for Ashes series in the early 2000s. So I do think it would be lovely to see Test cricket on terrestrial TV, but it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
By the way, just to pick up on this, Roland's answer about would he fancy playing Test cricket now and compared to before. I missed the last Test at the Oval. I was on holiday at a 40th birthday party, far too young for me, in Ibiza. I mean, crazy place. And we were at a gig, whatever you want to call it, club night, whatever. And there was all these, crazy people jumping around to this music. It was brilliant, actually. Calvin Harris, I mean, great fun performer. But midway through this sort of melee of people in the mosh pit jumping up and down, these two enormous black security guards waded through the crowd just to sort of check that everything was going okay. And two of the people I was with said, God, those guys are enormous. I mean, they were 6'5" and, built as wide as well. And I just said, I used to play cricket against people like that every day, practically. I mean, I think we sort of almost underestimated, or maybe we sort of let it, over the mists of time, sort of forget that some of those bowlers, and one, you got an injury from one, didn't you, Butch? I mean, those bowlers were phenomenal, and they were such physical specimens. They were so powerful, and I don't think anybody's got any conception who weren't around then, playing against them or watching, how incredibly sort of elite those West Indies, especially those West Indies fast bowlers were.
And how fit they were, because they just kept going.
Yeah.
Bold and bold. And
there were 4 of them in every game. 4 Jofra Archers, basically, you're facing. So, yeah, it was a hell of an era.
You could bowl 25 overs a day.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was a hell of an era, that, actually. But a great era to play in. I mean, we all played in that time, the 1980s, and I think it probably, you're the history book podcast, I think it was the second golden age of cricket, actually. Yeah. The first golden age was the sort of early 1900s, with W.G. Graves and all that. I think this 1980s had so many great players from all over the world wanting to play, the whole season, not just dipping in for a game or two here and there. So it was an amazing time to play the game.
We probably didn't realise it at the time, though, because you'd get the fixture list and you'd go through it and you think, there's Wayne Daniel on May the 23rd, there's Malcolm Marshall at the beginning of June, Sylvester Clarke far straight after that, and we got Colin Croft. So, in hindsight, we think we're privileged.
Naturally.
At the time, we weren't so sure.
You wanted to know where the nearest hospital was.
Well, I wanted to ask one final question. This is actually sort of a slightly, as again I mentioned that we're Hampshire followers, and this is quite a sad time for us. Robin Smith, who passed away and not long ago. And what is it about cricket? It seems to be more batsmen than bowlers. It's my sense. I haven't explored statistically, but it seems batsmen, the psychological element to cricket that impacts them more. What is it about mental health issues? And I know there's 4 of us here. I wonder if there's anyone who really wants to speak about it.
Simon has always said that bowlers don't think. But seriously.
Well, you're probably right.
That's probably true, actually. I think batsmen probably...
Well, there's the yips.
Batsmen probably overthink the game, and maybe over a 20-year period it probably affects them later on.
Also, I think, you both were batsmen. I mean, Vic was an all-rounder. I think the main thing about cricket is, for batsmen in particular, it's brutal. If you make a mistake as a batsman, you're out. That's it. That's the end of your game. You can come out and field, okay, but you can't sort of have another shot at goal, or have another shot at the dartboard, or have another shot with the snooker cue, whatever. You've made a mistake, you're out. You're dead, effectively. And I think that's a real brutal essence of cricket, which doesn't exist in any other sport. And batsmen have to deal with that especially on a mental approach every day.
Get 2 innings.
In some games.
But I don't know how that correlates to suicides, but you're right that the best players in the world, best batsmen in the world, they fail 30% of the time. The really good ones fail about 50%, 40% of the time. Well, just imagine being mediocre. You're failing at your job about 60, 70% of the time. I'm not saying that necessarily contributes to suicides, because it usually happens that the suicides usually take place after some people have retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a weird profession, all consuming.
Yeah.
And then at age 35, let's say,
Yeah.
you've got a whole new life, and some people adapt very quickly, and some find it difficult.
Yeah, Roland and I were talking about how different it is now with the PCA and how brilliant they are at players, and that has changed a little bit now. They do give support to players throughout their careers and try to provide past playing, occupations and help with that. So that does change.
I think also clubs now are more interested in the players themselves than just their performance. When we played, it was a case of pick, perform, you play, don't perform, you don't play, career comes to an end. I don't think many people bothered about that. They moved on to the next group. But I think now with the Professional Cricket Association, at least during a professional player's life, they're helping him to prepare for when he finishes. Nobody helped us to prepare when we finish. No. If you didn't have a clear plan yourself, then God help you. And I think that's a big change now, and maybe that would also help bring the suicide rates down, in that players don't feel now that they're on their own anymore, that they're going to get some help.
I hope so. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you. All links to the books are in the show notes. And of course, I forgot your great book, a whole lot of Yakka. A lot of hard Yakka, winner of the William Hill Sports Book, of course. So there's that there as well.
That tells you a lot about 80s cricket.
But thank you very much.
Can I just take a quick pic?
Try not to get the sweaty one.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You must be in line with it.
Dorian, great to chat. Thanks very much for joining me. And your book, The Gout. But how are you enjoying Chalke so far, discussing The Gout, where I think there are quite a few customers here?
Chalke is completely brilliant. I came last year. I was very, very keen to get involved this year, and I had great discussions with Charlotte Costello, and we came up with a wonderful session earlier on epidemics, and then I got to give a little talk later on after lunch on the gout. Actually, the gout is, the full title is The Gout, a medical microcosm in a changing world, because it's about a bit more than about gout. So gout, of course, is a condition that everybody has some preconceived notion about. And what I was keen to do was to explore the stereotypes of gout, and to explore the transition between, if you like, the Georgian concept of the gout, which was rather an umbrella term for all sorts of maladies, to modern day gout, and then see what was left behind that actually didn't fit into that new diagnosis. So, and on the way, I wanted to explore the development of ineffective and effective treatments.
But Dorian, let me dive in here about a bit of gout. So can I play the part of which I play very well, an uninformed member of the public asking you about gout. Now, this is a condition that I'm interested in because I studied 18th, 19th century history at A-level at school, and it seemed permanently prime ministers or peers or generals were all having bouts of gout when they were presumably drinking far too much red wine, port, porter beer, these kinds of... basically, I guess it comes down to a good old English diet of beef and red wine that causes the...
well, you're almost there. The first point you made is it was the sort of ruling class, which was absolutely true. You had to be able to afford to have gout. If you were poor, you just didn't get gout.
So it was actually, if you said you had gout, then people would be impressed?
Absolutely. People wanted to have it. But people wanted to have it for two reasons. One is that it had become a status symbol. And the other is that there was a long-standing feeling that probably went right into the middle of the 1800s, whereby gout was actually good for you. That it somehow it kind of neutralized bad humours, and that if you couldn't mount an attack of gout, then you were likely to be in for something far worse, because the humours would head inwards and in all sorts of bad ways.
Given the diet, presumably there's some truth to this.
There is every truth that gout is connected with other far worse maladies. So gout is now we know that gout, as we define it today, is linked to obviously a high uric acid, as most people know.
Is it crystallizing of your sort of blood in your toe or something?
Yeah, so the blood contains urate, and the urate seeps out of the blood into the fluid around the cells around your joints, and then if it seeps around and rises fast enough, you get crystallization, and then that triggers a severe inflammation.
And if untreated, what is the limit of gout?
Well, if untreated, that attack of gout will get better on its own. And it does so because it's the fresh crystals that cause the problem. And the crystals get coated by proteins within the body that kind of neutralize them. So they then, what happens is that over the course of years, they accumulate and cause these sort of hard, crusty, what are called tophi, lumps.
And you're pointing at your arm, even it would reach your arm, not just because I guess I'm assuming it sticks down there with your toes. And
the first attack is mostly in your big toe,
right?
But then it's a free for all around your joints.
Oh, I see. Can we explore a few figures who've suffered from? I mean, I've interviewed a great historian who lives today, Andrew Roberts, who's often complaining of his gout, although he says it's treated very well nowadays. But George IV, the son of the subject of Andrew's book, George III, I think is a famous sufferer.
George, the Prince Regent, and then George IV was a famous martyr to the gout.
The poster boy.
Yeah, poster boy for gout. So very definitely, and he was very much the subject of many of the satirical cartoons of that era.
Gilray particularly,
yeah.
Yes.
And who invariably painted him and anyone else who they wanted to ridicule with a bandaged foot.
That's on the front cover of your book, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
So the bandaged foot for the satirical cartoonists was an allusion to wealth, free living, injudicious lifestyle, and if you're a politician, to incompetence. It didn't signify anything to do with your health. It was because often they did it on people who didn't even have gout.
Oh, wonderful! So there's a modern element to this, which what is it? It's different though today in that it's not the elites who, apart from Andrew Roberts.
Well, that's an absolutely excellent question. So I mean, many people think of gout as being a sort of Georgian relic, a kind of vestigial entity of the olden days. But and I think what happened was that, with improved diagnoses of different types of arthritis, what we now call proper true gout, it became clear that wasn't as common as previously thought. That a lot of people who said they had gout actually had something else. And then gout was forgotten about, but actually what's happening now is that we're seeing a revival. And there's plenty of data now that signifies that gout is on the increase, particularly in high-income countries. So again, it's the wealthy that get gout, but there is a difference, which is that now, because gout is very closely linked to body weight, and we know that body weight is linked to poverty, that it's actually now not the rich that are getting gout, but in the high-income countries, it's the poor. So there's a big difference.
Indeed.
And I should also say that gout itself is very painful, and it's a rotten thing to have, but it's not usually going to do any long-term damage. But it is very closely associated with heart disease and with strokes. Because when you get an attack of gout, the inflammation that it releases has a remote effect on your blood vessels. And if you have gout, you need to start thinking about looking after your blood pressure and doing what you can to remove your risk factors for cardiovascular disease.
There you have it on the History Book Club podcast. Not only do you get fascinating books, but you also get health advice, which you should all follow. Dorian, this is wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Roger Moorhouse, you are a great friend of the History Book Club podcast. So it's such a pleasure to see you here on this hot day at the Chalke History Festival. But I wanted to grab you because you've not really talked about your book that is a recent publication on the U-boat war. And so, given the fact that we are suffering here under conditions very similar, I would argue worse than the U-boat veterans of the Second World War, how do you think it compares?
This is honestly is a bit of a walk in the park. I mean, it is probably 35 degrees. If we're honest, your average U-boatman in the Second World War would be dealing with. If you're crossing the tropics, they could be dealing with 50 degrees inside the U-boat. And then, if they're in the Arctic, it's basically freezing. So I think the extremes are greater than we're experiencing today, Ollie, to be honest.
Oh, so it did rely on the temperature of the water that would...
It did, because there was no air conditioning in the German vessels. American U-boats had air conditioning, but the German ones didn't. I mean, they do have double hulls, so to some extent it's kind of insulated, but it's still dependent on climatic conditions. And of course, you spend 95% of your time on the surface. So if it's 40 degrees on the surface, it's going to be 40 degrees or more below decks. You've got the engines running and everything else, so it's going to be add on to that.
Well, the main thrust of your book, which by the way is a thrilling read, and I don't often say that with history books because often they're not. But this is a book that's interesting about U-boats because there's this great fear of U-boats, particularly, but I would say particularly more with the British than the Americans, maybe. Yeah. Do you think that this is overblown, as in that sort of the wolf pack, which is the title of the book, underwater is this sort of really very scary thing, but actually is never as frightening as it really the statistics prove?
Yes, and that's one of the strands of the book. I mean, the main point of it for me when I started working on it was to look at the German material and to try and tell it from a German perspective, because that was the bit that I thought was missing from the conventional narrative. So I started looking at all the sort of German archival material and the memoir material and so on, diaries and so on, to try and fill that in, to basically, tell the narrative, flip it by 180 degrees and tell the narrative from the perspective of the U-boat crew. How they got there, what did they eat for breakfast, what was it like, attacking a convoy, being depth charged, whatever it was. So that was my primary intention. And then, once you kind of do that using all of those original materials and stuff, then one of the other strands that came out was actually, if you look at the U-boat war from a different perspective, it forces you to look at it afresh, right? And it struck me from that change of perspective that the conventional British view, which was something like, the U-boats were almost like it was like a nightmare sort of made real. There's this unseen killer, and they attacked at night, mid-Atlantic. I mean, this is the stuff of nightmares, and in a sense, that's what the U-boats represented to, generation of British sailors, merchant mariners, and their wives and children back home. That was it. However, and this is not to, denigrate their service or the suffering, because it was horrible. It was utterly horrible to be torpedoed in mid-Atlantic, right? But if you look at the stats on the Battle of the Atlantic, throughout the whole of the war, 92% of Allied merchant freight got through. 92%. So you can see from that alone that, in a sense, the tonnage war that the Germans were trying to inflict on the Allies was pretty much futile, right? The total number of ships that they sunk was around 3,000. There are just less than 3,000 vessels that are built by the Americans under the Lend-Lease, under the Liberty Ship program, right? So the Allied merchant fleet grows by 100% during the war. Right? It doesn't decrease because of German sinkings. It grows because of the numbers that are being built and other countries coming in and so on. So the word that sprung to mind for me was futility. It was a futile exercise, and yet 30,000 German submariners were killed. 75%, 3 in 4 submariners were killed during the war. German submariners. It's the highest loss rate of any arm of any service in any war. It's astonishing. So, when you put all that together, I think it gives us a really sort of fresh eye on the Battle of the Atlantic. It really does.
Absolutely. This is a real contribution to our understanding of that part of the conflict. And I think the way you ended the book, you talk about the futility and the, I guess, tragedy for those who fought, who were not the bloodlust Nazis that we all understand. You bumped into someone, I think, this is how you end the book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it was a wonderful scene. I actually went back. It was mid-February. It was absolutely freezing. We're talking a lot. We're sitting here in 35 degrees, but it was probably -5 or -10 on Germany's Baltic coast. There is a memorial to the German U-boat force, both in the First and Second World War, a place called Moltenort. And I was there. I'd been there before, and I wanted to go back because I wanted to finish the book with a sort of set piece at Moltenort. So I thought, when I went before, I hadn't taken enough notice. I wanted to go back and look at, like, how big is it? How many memorials are there? And, how many vessels are commemorated and all of that. So I literally was there with a notebook. And this elderly lady came up to me and all huddled up in the cold, and she said, "Are you looking for someone?" Because there's all the names of the dead are listed. And I said, "No, I'm I kind of spluttered a bit and said, "Well, I'm a historian."
I'm a historian.
I just kind of, otherwise it looks weird. I just, I'm sort of doing some work here and so on. And she said, and you have to kind of understand that for Germans, it's a bit weird to talk to random people in the street. They don't tend to do it. They're very private generally. So talking to a stranger like that is unusual in itself. And then to carry on the conversation as she did and to talk about the war is really unusual in my experience. So she said, "Am I looking for someone?" And I said, "No." And then she said, "Oh, I am. I'm looking for my grandfather." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she said, she couldn't remember the number of the vessel. He was on a U-boat. Can't remember the number of the U-boat he was on. And she said, it was very poignant. She said, "Anyone that would have known is long dead. He was killed in the last 2 weeks of the war, sunk. And by that stage in the war, because Allied countermeasures are so good, as I describe in the book, the standard sinking is going straight down, is a catastrophic, hull break through depth charging, hedgehog, whatever it is.
Everyone dead.
And basically everyone dead, right? So what's really interesting, you look at there are these reports of captures of vessels that were done by British naval intelligence during the war. And there's lots of them for 1940, there's lots for 41, lots for 42, they tail off a bit in 43, there's hardly any in 44, and the last one that's listed is something like the summer of 44, because after that they're not capturing them anymore, because they're so effective at killing U-boats, they're just going straight down. Everyone killed, right? So he was obviously one of those. And she said, "I can't remember the number," and she ended up, she told me the story as far as she knew it. And she ended up just having this, she had this sort of laminated photo of him, and she sort of put it down at, at sort of a salient point where she thought it was appropriate. And she said, my mother, grew up with her mother as a single mother. So, her grandmother never remarried, all of this. So this has been like a sort of shadow on the family. And for her then, as a middle-aged woman, to then come and want to try and pay her respects to the grandfather she never knew, I thought it was an amazingly poignant moment. And as I sort of walked away from this slightly awkward conversation in the snow of Moltenort, I just thought, I remember thinking, that's the end of the book right there. And so it is. It's the last sort of page and a half of the book, and it was a really poignant ending to sort of bring it all round to a sort of human element. Which is what I really tried to do with the book, is to explain, how those guys ended up there, what they thought about what they were doing, which is, it's complex, but we kind of need to understand that. So that's what I tried to bring out.
You certainly did, Roger. Wonderful stuff. Well, thanks, Roger. Now I'll let you get back to the 35-degree heat. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Charles, this is a great pleasure for me. Charles Cumming, a very good best-selling author of spy fiction. So thanks so much for speaking to me. I was very keen to speak to you really about your what really got you into writing espionage. And I wondered, are there particular authors that interest you? What is it that I guess is your main passion? The author? Is there an author or a particular area of espionage that interests you most?
So I was 25, and a family friend tapped me on the shoulder, as it were, for interviews with MI6. This is in the mid-1990s, and I didn't get in, but that experience, I felt, as a sort of fledgling novelist, was crying out to be dramatized. So I wrote a novel, A Spy by Nature, which was, I would say, sort of 30% of it was a very accurate depiction of what had happened to me in the interview process, the early stages of the MI6 interview process, and the rest of it was a pure fiction about industrial espionage in the oil business. But having had that experience, sort of touched the face of the secret world, as it were.
Do you wish you'd gone in?
No, I don't. I think if I went in now, I'd be quite good at it because I understand it quite well. But I was incredibly green as a 25-year-old, and I think they knew that too. But I read a yard of John le Carré immediately afterwards, and he was always the sort of the Picasso, the Bob Dylan to me of writers. And I suppose I was sort of most strongly influenced by him. Less so by Fleming and Dayton, the other kind of giants of the 20th century.
Right, and so that's interesting. So now you've got a number of novels, and your latest, Icarus 17, under your belt. You feel like this is a world you could contribute to. I mean, obviously you're far too well known now, but were you to be in another life with the knowledge you have, you feel like you could perform effectively as a...
Well, I think interesting actually. So the Box 88 Lachlan Kite series is planned to be 7 books, of which Icarus 17 is the 4th, and Lachlan Kite, who's the protagonist, is in many ways a sort of new, improved version of me. Smarter, braver, better looking, more hair, but it's a historical series, actually. I should almost be sort of talking about it here at the Chalke Valley, or the Chalke History Festival, as we call it now.
Indeed.
Because the idea is that you follow Lockie from the end of the Cold War all through the 1990s, the year that spying forgot, or spy fiction forgot as well, past 9/11 and into the sort of post-Trump age. So you see Lockie in his 30s and 20s as a young man, operationally. And then you see him as a man of our age in his 50s who's sort of running things in the UK. So you have these two dual timelines. And there's no question that I think all through my fiction I've been applying bits of myself to my protagonists and wondering what if I had done that, or what would I do if I were in this situation? What impact would it have on me psychologically, on my family life, on my children, on my wife? Those sorts of questions have always been quite fascinating to me.
Well, Lockie is working now then, I guess, in an era where, I guess, if you're a fan of Le Carré, the Carla trilogy, starting with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that's the 70s. That's where Britain is in a kind of a low ebb. And many people would argue that we're now in a low ebb. And do you think then that, these are kind of parallels? And do you reflect on that when you're writing?
Andy Burnham's going to save us.
Yes, that's what I'm told.
That's what I keep telling myself every morning. The mantra. Yeah, I suppose it's the country is unhappy at the moment, isn't it? There's a.
Well, you get that in the Le Carré writing,
yes.
Very much in the 70s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think a lot of that was his own unhappiness. You read. I'm going to forget the name of the
Adam Sisman's
biography. The man who emerges from that book is a depressive. And I think all of the kind of sex that he wasn't allowed to write about while the carrier was alive, and that is all the antics of a depressive man. That's my personal theory. So yeah, that layer that into the doldrums of the 70s, and it's very effective stuff. But the world of spying has changed so much since that period. One of the things I try to get into in the Lachlan Kite books is the difference between the way that we spied in the 1990s, sort of what you might refer to colloquially as Moscow rules, where there were no cell phones, no Google, no Wi-Fi, no number plate recognition cameras, all the rest of it, with the present day where it's all singing, all dancing technology. And particularly in Judas 62, there's a sort of compare and contrast where you can see Lockie in Russia just after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he can't call for help, and he gets in a lot of trouble in the city of Voronezh. And then you see him in present-day Dubai, where you can't move for somebody knowing exactly who you are and why you're there and what you're up to. CCTV, sort of blanket CCTV, Orwellian surveillance in the UAE. So that's really and then obviously you have, talking about political doldrums in the 1970s, you have the great nightmare of Trump and Netanyahu and Putin, and they've been certainly fueling my fiction for a long time now.
Right. Well, you're going to have plenty more material, I think. Charles, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for giving me your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me along.
Cheers.
We've come to the end of this club meeting, so thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch about club benefits, please do, either by email or on X or Instagram. Links are in the show notes. I've also included my Substack link so members can read articles I've written on various matters that may be of interest. The History Book Club is written and presented by me, Oliver Webb-Carter. Music is by listener Chat DMZ. Episodes continue next week and every week, so please do join, subscribe, and if you can provide the club with a 5-star rating, we would be delighted. In the meantime, I thank you again, and now I have to usher members out into the real world. Until next time. I was